I'm now going to turn to Leslie, and I'm going to, oops. Oh, and thank you for recording. Did you do the recording?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was just wondering because whether
Yeah. That was a good idea. I forgot already.
Yeah,
Good idea.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, because I'm still waiting for people or not, and whether we start official or not. Okay, but I started recording now.
So the idea here is that I'm now going to turn to Leslie and ask her to pick somebody else who is in our call, and then describe how she has a connection to that person.
Okay, Manuela.
Okay. Okay. And what would you describe?
Oh, what?
Connection? The connection? You mean the connection?
Yeah, our connection, like she's my former student.
Okay. Very good. And then we're going to turn to Manuela. We're going to ask the question. There you are. Manuela, could you nominate somebody else in the call and describe how you connect to them?
Hello?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I said Yoko.
Ryoko.
I don't think I can ask to unmute, but I can't actually make her unmute. So there you go. Ask to unmute.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm talking, actually, I have to talk through Leslie's phone over there. You can't hear me?
Oh my goodness, you're in the same room, and so I didn't get that you were in.
She's got like a fancy,
She's got the virtual background. I couldn't tell. Okay, so I'm sorry I couldn't hear quite clearly, but if you'll say again who you will nominate.
Okay, I nominate Yoko.
Okay. And what would your relationship descriptor be?
I did a survey for her once as a test person.
Okay.
For her research.
So you're a colleague.
Yeah. So it was kind of fun.
Very good. And now I'm going to ask Ryoko, could I ask you to nominate someone?
Yes, then I'll nominate Miss Kim Sejun, Sejun,
All right.
Sun Kim. That I met yesterday online.
So Sejun Park or
no, Miss Kim.
Kim. Okay, very good. So that's SUNGYPUN. Okay, we're going to need more room. And will you describe how you guys are connected?
It was just yesterday that I met her online, and I learned a lot from her research.
Mm-hmm.
So you met at DISC?
Yes, yes, yeah, I was.
Oh, okay. So that's the real story here. Met at DISC 21. Very good. And then what I'm going to do is ask Sungyun to also go ahead, and if you'll nominate somebody as well.
Hi. I think it's Yoko, the person who Sunyan Lee, right?
You can nominate anybody, but oh, did I get the wrong person?
Just want to clarify, it was me. Sunyan Lee, right?
Yeah, I think it's
oh, okay.
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 Like, I hope I pronounced it right. But,
yeah, correct.
Songyun, Peter's wife.
yeah, correct. Thank you. I just wanted to know if it was if I understood correct. Thank you, Ryoko. Thank you. I want to nominate.
Was it you? Yeah.
Oh, let me get it correct then. Hold on. I'll replace this. Okay, hang on a moment.
Because I don't have my surname here.
Okay. yeah.
Okay, and then There you go. Who will you nominate, Sung Yeon?
If I may, I would let me nominate Sejong Park, yesterday's session moderator. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay. And hello, Sejong Park.
Thank you.
And it was so that was a Met at Disc event contact as well. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Very good. And then Sejong, who will you nominate?
Hi, I will nominate you, Mark.
Oh, hi. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. And how would you describe our relationship?
I met you at Disc like 7 years ago or something.
I'd have to go and check my Flickr feed to figure out when I was last in Korea. It was a couple of years back now. You're right. It's been a while. So met at Disc. What was that year? Maybe it was Disc 17. We'll have to
13
go.
or 14,
Wow, that far back.
probably disc 14.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Yes,
I will-
this started 2014.
And was I there for the Daegu instance of it in 24? Well, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
2014.
I will then. I'll nominate Park Han Woo.
Okay, thank you. I will nominate then Leslie.
Okay, and then
And our relation is the colleague.
all right. Guess what, Leslie? It's come back to you.
Okay, I'll nominate Gunai. G-U-N-A-Y, yeah.
All right. How do you know Ganai?
She's my student.
All right. Very good. And Gunai, would you like to nominate somebody else?
Can you hear?
Yes, I can.
I would nominate.
You have to turn off your sound.
Yeah.
Peter?
She nominates Peter.
Got it.
We met at this.
And you met at Disc, which was the year? This one?
Yeah.
All right. We'll go grab the Met at Disc 21 badge here. All right. And then Peter, may I ask you to nominate somebody?
Yeah, I'll nominate Inga,
Inga. Okay, very good.
who I met at, I think, Discs long ago too.
Yes,
Uh,
very long ago.
Yeah,
14, probably the same.
yeah, when we were young and innocent, and when I was also a PhD student.
2014.
It's 14, was it?
14.
That was the first event.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm going to
Sorry,
have
I'm not
to,
familiar with other colleagues. Is there anybody else?
You can
who are not in
renominate
the
somebody,
list?
I think.
You can. There's no limitation. So Inga, who would you like to nominate?
Who else?
You can just nominate Hanu again if you want to. Don't worry about
this
it.
is the same person.
Yeah, yeah.
If you want.
You Felicia. You should nominate Felicia.
And look,
Felicia,
this was what year?
I
This
can
was the last
nominate
time.
Felicia.
Let's see, this is 2010. Oh my goodness, it's been a long time. I was younger. Anyway, let's go back to the business at hand. And did I hear Felicia?
Felicia.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me find Felicia. There's Felicia. Okay. And how do you connect Inga with Felicia?
We are colleagues.
Colleagues.
I can say so.
Very good. Felicia, you get to nominate somebody now, if you would.
I will nominate Sejong Park.
Mm-hmm.
We're also colleagues.
Very good. And Sejong, it's come back to you. You get to pick again.
I will pick Hanu Park.
Okay. And what would you label your connection to Hanwoo as?
Former advisor.
Okay. I have former student as a category. May I use that?
Yeah, you can use
Okay,
that.
okay. Just so that there could be two of the same category. All right. And then Hanwoo, you get to pick again. You're a popular guy.
Yeah, I will nominate the Felicia.
Felicia?
Yeah.
Okay, back to Felicia. Very good. And what's your connection?
Relationship with colleague.
Colleague, okay.
Yeah.
And I will point out, Felicia, you might direct your attention at perhaps Don or who else? Jean. I'm just looking for the people who have not yet been nominated. So but that's a selection criteria or a pressure. We should talk about that later.
I met Don at this workshop.
Oh, very good. David, and that's okay. And then this will be a met at Disc 21 kind of relationship. And so did we miss anybody? I think we might have. Did we miss anybody? If you have yet to be nominated, would you like to?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Jian. So
Hi.
I saw Sejong Park's Facebook page on Facebook. So that's why I attended this workshop. So I don't know anyone like in person.
That's great. Well, that in some way is a very useful thing for you to be in some ways, but by the end of this event, hopefully there will be more connections for you and there will have been a transformation. So
Yes.
I'm going to put this over here for a moment, grab this. We just encoded a kind of data, a very important kind of data that is network data. We have just encoded something called an edge list. And if we click a button in NodeXL, we now have a network.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. You're missing Seung-Yan Kim.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
I don't know who this person is, but there's a, yeah, he or she.
I'm looking for them in, oh, yeah, that's true. Seung-Yan Kim, may we ask you, how did you come to today's event? Why? And I guess I didn't hear from Seung-Yan Kim. And that's okay. We don't want to mute you. We want to ask you to unmute. I'm going to let Seung-Yan Kim link to herself. Okay. And thank you, Peter, for calling that out. And Seung-Yan, if you would like to later unmute, you're welcome to, and let me know who you want to be to.
And mark number 13, Peter and Inga, the relationship should be met at Disc 14.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So we now have a graph. We have a network. We have a collection of connections. And we have the beginning of a network visualization of a graphical representation of the web of connections among this set of people. And while we are a small group, it is true, we have reasonably complex relationships nonetheless. And you'll notice that we have little arrows here. And I guess we could ask for every connection here that is to another person here, is it reciprocated? We didn't ask that question, but we could. That's something we could ask. And we may find that some of these relationships are maybe equal or some are imbalanced and so on. So we now have something of a network, and we can lay it out, we could look at it and view it in different ways, and we may notice certain things about it already. Certain dots have more lines than others. And yet it's also somewhat difficult to sort of make sense of the graph in that, they're just dots and we don't know who's who. And so here we are in NodeXL, and the tool is designed to make the creation of these networks and the analysis of these networks about as easy as making a pie chart. If you can make a pie chart, you can now make this, because making a pie chart isn't that much different than what we just did. You need a from and a to, the sender and the receiver, and it's nice to have other columns. But even with just this, not much data, we have some insight into the social structure of our little group. We're a small group, and yet we have social structure. Wouldn't it be easier, though, if we could label the dots? That would be a useful thing. And so here in the NodeXL Pro menu, you may notice we have a bunch of little sub areas: data, graph, visual properties, analysis, options, show hide, and help. I will have a slide here just a second that will make this a lot easier to see. I think it's, oops, overshot it. Hang on a second. Here we go. So here it is in a easier to see on Zoom kind of view. Let me make that big for you. And slideshow, put it on monitor 1. Okay, so when you're in Excel, you're probably in an environment that's somewhat familiar. A lot of people are pretty comfortable with Excel. Are there any people on the call who have really not had any Excel experience? Anybody who needs an introduction to spreadsheet? Okay, so I'm going to take that as a little user participation poll. So that's 100%. Everybody knows about Excel. And so what we've done is just pushed a new ribbon into the menu, a new menu into the ribbon of Excel. And it has these various sections: data, graph, visual properties, analysis, options, show hide, and help. And we are about to use this button, autofill columns. And this is the button we're going to use to essentially control what is the shape, the size, the color, the image, the opacity, the label, all the stuff that you can control about what it looks like. So I'm going to go to this menu, visual properties, and select autofill columns. And I get this dialog box that says, here are all the things that you can control the look of. And that's color, shape, size, how transparent it is. Do we show it or not? Does it have a label? Where does the label go? Does it have a tooltip? And we can set these things. So each of these things, you get a drop down, you pick what you want, and there can, in some cases, be rules or special other things. And then you hit autofill. And in a few moments, we get a different graph. Well, the same graph, but we get a graph with labels on it. And it's a little bit better, I guess. I think it now conveys a little bit more meaning. We could add more metadata. And here we are now on the vertices worksheet. And we could add information to the network that we know from various sources. We could say, people have, well, okay, this is going to be unfair because I think Honolulu's got an enormous H score, but I was going to say people have an H score, right? And I don't know what everybody's H-score is, but I'm going to make it up. And I don't know, I've got like a 53 and Leslie's probably got a 62 and Manuela might be working her way up to, well, don't take it the wrong way if I've underestimated. But I'm just gonna put random numbers here now. I'm gonna make things up. And that's not a number. Hang on. So I'm just making up some attribute. And again, these are fictional attributes. These don't represent the reality of anybody's situation, I'm sure. So let's see. And there we go. So I've just given the data some made up attribute. There's an H-score. We really should just change it to value. It's just some strength. It could be dollars earned. It could be minutes spent in a phone call together. There are lots and lots of things that could be attributes. But if we now refresh the graph, oh, of course, I'm sorry. If we now go to autofill and we say the size of the thing should now be equal to this thing value. And where did value go? Let's see. And so we're going to make things change their size, and then we can make them change their shape. And we could conceivably even go and get the profile photo for folks, maybe from their Twitter, and we can put their profiles in here in a second. And that would allow us to decorate the graph more. And so now if we say, let's say, go to autofill columns, and we want to say the size is going to be based on the value, and we're now going to see that the dot that represents each person is a variable size. So we can do more. We can do a lot more with this. And there are other attributes. There's like shape and color. And so we could do all sorts of things that load off of, okay, enlarge the view, can do. What I'm going to do is jump back to the slides and show it to you from that point of view. So what we were just doing is using the various menus to begin to map data to display attributes. We're looking for a way to give people color and shape and size. We would like to potentially use profile photos. Let's see if I can go and get Hanwoo's profile photo from Twitter. And we could then very quickly put that photo into the data set. I think I see, where are you, Hanwoo? I'm gonna find you. Oh, actually, I got Sejong Park first. And so let's try this. Copy image address, here we go. So Sejong Park, there you are. I'm now going to go over here and type into this cell called image file. I've just put a URL that points at your Twitter profile photo. And for your shape, I'm going to say that it should be an image. And these are one of many possible choices. We could give people all sorts of shapes, like sphere, or we could make somebody a solid diamond, and so on. So there's a lot of different ways, and I see that I've made an error here that is worth noting. I've written Hanwoo's name 2 different ways, and that's a big error for network data. And so Sejong, where are you? There you are. And we should just make your size a little larger and refresh the graph. And I think we'll get to see that it is your profile photo. There it is.
Thank you.
There you go. So my point in showing you this kind of interaction with the workbook is just to highlight the way in which there is a direct manipulation option. Everything you see on the screen has a column and a row. Every connection is represented in the edges worksheet, where we have one person here and one person here. And I'm going to try to fix this. I had an extra space in your name. And therefore, I wonder if we carried that mistake forward. We'll have to see. We can express a lot of things as a collection of connections. This could be the relationship between institutions, corporations, political parties. It could be the relationship between Twitter users, YouTube videos, Wikipedia pages. The concept of network is a pretty universal one. I like to say that the universe certainly is made out of atoms. But it is also true, and perhaps even more true, that the universe is made out of molecules. Not just atoms alone, but atoms that have connected up and interacted with other atoms. And so I'm reminded of a common pair of chemical elements, sodium and chlorine. Sodium is a metal that explodes if it touches water, and chlorine is a poison gas. But of course, sodium chloride is table salt, and I like to put it on my food. And so when you put two things together, they sometimes change their behavior. And so looking at the emergent properties of a set of connections is really what NodeXL is all about. It's about making networks much more accessible. And good question here. Can these things be events? Yeah, well, I mean, if an event is related to another event, let's say it is a series of workshops at DISC, DISC 14, DISC 21, and those workshops involve more than one set of people, and they are therefore connected to each other. Events are entities. Any set of entities that connect to other entities are perfectly good. And so your point is a good one, because I think it raises the issue of what about the edges? What about making it so that we can tell something about the relationship? And so we do have in autofill the edges worksheet, and we can say that the edges have a label, and the label, let's see, on the edges worksheet, we have an add your own columns. We should have this here, but we can certainly go in here. Let's see. Zoom may be slowing me down, but okay, we'll come back to that. But we will be able to put a label on the edge, be able to tell some of us are connected in different ways. Some of us have met at DISC. So the menu you would deal with is a little less complicated than, let's say, learning Python. And I'm not knocking learning Python. Python's great, but it takes time, and results are not guaranteed. We also take a little bit of time, but a lot less time. And I guess the big difference is results are guaranteed. If you stay within the track laid down by the application, you're almost certainly guaranteed to get the results that you're going to see me demonstrate here today. So for example, if I want to ask a question about Twitter, I might go to the NodeXL menu for data and ask to import data, and I'll be presented with a menu. And these are the set of data sources. We've added a few, we've lost a few, but we have data importers for a variety of data sources that are of interest. No doubt there's a data source that you'd like that we don't support, but we have a way to work around that. But we'll import from Twitter and YouTube and wikis and Flickr And also it used to import from Facebook and Instagram, but that was a long time ago when Mr. Zuckerberg was more generous. So instead of learning how to program against the API of Twitter, you have to authenticate, then you form a query and you launch it against the REST interface, and then you get result pages back that have to be parsed and put into a database. Our approach is to allow you to click and select a query term, configure a dialog box, and hit OK. And when you do, what you're going to get is a graph and a data set. And the data set's going to have a whole bunch of worksheets. And these worksheets contain different dimensions of the data. And we've seen two of those dimensions already. There's the information about how the, let's see here, how the things are connected. And then there was another worksheet with just a list of all the things, the names of the people. And so that's the edges worksheet. And the vertices worksheet, it's the set of connections and then the set of things that can be connected. And so I'm going to jump back to the top here for just a second, because I want to remind us all that we're here largely because there is an interest in social media. And I guess quick show of hands if you want, how many people here are interested in doing research on social media? There is a raise a hand button in Zoom, and if you don't want to do that and you just want to unmute and say me, but it would be interesting to see just how many folks are interested in the study of social media. Okay, so I see at least a few.
I can't find the button.
Can't find the button. Yeah, I understand.
I see. Oh, I can do hearts and all sorts of great things. Okay, sorry.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, there are all. So where did you find that button?
It says reactions with a smiley face on the ribbon below, and you can look surprised. Anyway, sorry.
There you go. All right. So I did not see uniform agreement that social media was the main topic. Would you go to the chat perhaps and consider typing in the things that are networks that are not social media that you do find interesting? And I assure you we can map those things, but I'm going to start with a presumption that social media networks might be a topic of broad interest. And so there is a temptation to imagine that things like hashtags and discussion groups and Facebook pages and Instagram hashtags, maybe even email lists and web boards are kind of like this. They're kind of like a flock. I mean, after all, the Twitter icon is a little bird. And so the metaphor of flocking is a tempting one. And there are some very attractive aspects of this metaphor. There is no one apparently in charge. There is no boss. There is no law. There is no institutional framework that brings it together. And it can change moment to moment. And so it takes many forms, and nobody's really telling you to go do it, right? So it's a very self-organized phenomenon. So those are good parts of the metaphor, but in what way is this a bad metaphor, especially for, yes, politics and events through social media analysis is a okay topic for us, I think. So in what way is this flock metaphor not valid? Well, one of the big ways is that in a flock that we see like this, it appears as if all the birds are equal. And that's just never the case with humans. Humans are always unequal. And there is always just a few big birds. And so if humans were birds that flocked, we would not be starlings. We would be more likely to be chickens, because chickens have a pecking order. And so we should be careful with our metaphors, because what we're going to see is that if we use the tools of social media network analysis, we're going to start to ask and answer questions that we didn't maybe think to ask and answer before. Questions like, just how social is social media? And if you'll accept a lot of the assumptions that I'm going to make with you, you may come to the conclusion that the answer is to the question, just how social is social media? Not much, not very social. If social means reciprocity and density, we're going to see that the data from naturally occurring social media data sets often lacks reciprocity and density, and therefore is perhaps interactive, but not necessarily social, and certainly not community as we would know it. So the question could be asked, just how much online community is there in online community? And the answer again might be not much. So if our goal is to understand social media, why do we want to take the network perspective? Why is that going to help? So it's a way of mapping the flock that allows us to actually pay attention to its shape, its structure. It captures some of that amorphous blob-like property that we just saw in that image. And so it is true that the number 10 would be an accurate summary of this network, but the networky part of these 10 things contains a lot of information that is lost by the number 10. And so volume is great. Volume is accurate. Volume is worth calculating. We certainly are not suggesting that we should not count the dots. We're going to count them. But isn't it interesting that some dots are not equal to others by some very mathematically, empirically, quantifiably, objectively different things? Not all of these dots are equal to others. And it is their position in the network that makes them different, not just, let's say, how strong they are or how tall they are, but rather also where they are in a network. And so geographers often provide us with services like Google Maps. And when we come to tools, GIS tools, geographical information systems, we often have 3 questions. At least I do. And these 3 questions are, when I open up Google Maps, I ask the question, 1, where am I? 2, where do I want to be? 3, how do I get there? And so we are arguing that geographic information systems are clearly remarkably powerful. Pardon me. I'll be back. There we go. They're obviously remarkably powerful, but what about sociological information systems? Social network information systems that would allow us to ask and answer questions like, where am I in my network? Who occupies a position in my network that I find interesting, that I'd like to try to occupy as well, or have a similar kind of position? And of course, how do I get there? And so when we urge you to, quote, think link, what we're looking to do is shape your view away from mere volume. Mere volume says, these 2 boxes of Legos, because they have the same number of bricks, must be the same thing. And of course, that's just not the same. It's not true. We can now look at, just because it's the same number of people, we may discover that the contents are very, very different. So knowing how many tweeters or retweets or followers, that's not enough. So we ask the question, what does a hashtag look like? And we don't mean this, and we don't mean hashtag. So what does that mean? We are talking about all kinds of collections of annotated connections. So generically, stuff that you can reply in. So email lists, web boards, discussion groups, tweets, anything where somebody replies to you and there's a line that connects you to them. And so we don't just want to know what a hashtag looks like. We would like to come up with some adequate representation that would give us overview, a sense of structure. And so the question should also be asked, why? Why not just do the big data thing, right? We are in the big data era. And I answer that by using Francois Anscombe's quartet. Francois Anscombe, the statistician, who gives you the following challenge. Dr. Anscombe would like you to tell him, and I'll stand as proxy for him, of the 4 distributions you see here, there are a few data points that are either errors or outliers. Can you find them? And by the way, what I'd also like you to do is pick, of distribution 1, 2, 3, 4, if we're going to remove one because it's least like the others, which one do you want to remove? So I'm going to give you a minute. Actually, I'm going to go and get my glass of water, which I left in the kitchen. I'll be right back. So I want you to do those 2 tasks. Which data points are we going to throw out because they're either errors or outliers, and which whole data set are we going to throw out because it's least like the others? I'll be right back. All right. So that's about 11 of us, and that's 11 human brain minutes. And so I'll just look for it. Which of the distributions are we going to throw away? No strong answers, huh?
Well, the 1 in 4 with the 19, that's an outlier, isn't it?
That's an outlier. Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, it's a bit early here.
So what about statistics, right? We could have put summary statistics at the bottom of each of these. That would have helped, except that it probably wouldn't because they all have the same summary statistics. So that was a clever one by Francois there. So I'm going to now show you the same data, and I believe you're going to answer both of those questions with great sense of certainty. And your brain will answer that question for you in less than 400 milliseconds. So orders of magnitude faster. And so here we go. I think your brain will make a noise that sounds something like, oh, in my language. You know, that's what my brain sounds like anyway. So there you go. I think the sound it makes is, oh, why didn't you say so? Right? I mean, clearly potentially outlier or error. And of the 3, I'm throwing out this one because they all kind of slope a little bit, but not this one. And so this one I'm going to throw out. But you may have different opinions, but I think we can now argue about the data from the data with the data in a way that is compatible with the human brain. I'll note that this, and by this I mean tabular data, was invented by Rene Descartes in what, 1606? Like before that, they just didn't do this. And that means it's new. But this is curvy colored dots potentially in motion. We do this all the time. We're looking for the right berries, right? We have mastery over this task in a way that we don't when it's presented to us like this. And that's why we're going to draw pictures of social media networks. We're going to try to come away with visual insights into the data that's going to let us tell a story about collections of annotated connections. And so what is it that we need minimally in this? We need something about the shape of the crowd. We need to know when there is a peak, particularly for critical events. When did some crisis occur? When was there a sudden change in the population? When did the content change from one series of tokens to another series of tokens? What URLs are being invoked? What hashtags are being used? How do new ideas move through the network? And of course, new for 2016, invasion and manipulation. If we are going to have some sense of what is abnormal, we will need to construct a very clear sense of what is normal. And so we need to document the landscape of the everyday activity of social media so that we could then identify when those everyday activities are being disrupted in some way. So I am a sociologist, and we really think that two or more people is the phenomena of interest. We are not psychologists. We do not really care about what is inside the brain of any one of these people, but we really care about all the relationships among them. And it's true that the psychologist may someday look inside your head and see what's in it, but it is absolutely the case that today sociologists can look between you and other people and see the existence and nature of your relationships, and you can do it too. So crowds really matter, but you know, COVID and social media, and in the United States, you know, we're a little nervous about crowds. And now, I mean, some of us are taking off masks. I'm not sure I'm taking off my mask anytime soon, but it is the case that if there are going to be crowds, better that they be virtual crowds, at least until vaccine is more universally available. The challenge we have is that virtual crowds are difficult to have insights into. And so they're kind of like Anscombe's quartet. I could ask you to read a lot of tweets, but the reality is you can't read a lot of tweets. I mean, let's define a lot. How many tweets can you read in a minute? I'm going to give you 10 tweets in a minute. I may be low, maybe high. Indulge me for a moment. So if it's 10 tweets a minute, how many tweets is that in an hour? So 600 tweets an hour. And how many hours could you possibly sit still reading tweets? And I think the answer is somewhere on the order of, you know, 2.5 to maybe 3.5, 4 hours a day. And you do have a day job, so this is gonna be hard to do. And if we give you 4 hours of tweet consumption per day, that's 2,400 to maybe 3,000 tweets a day. It's a lot of work. But a topic of interest could easily be generating 3,000 tweets an hour, maybe a minute. World Cup generated 6,000 tweets a second. And so as a data collection and analysis mechanism, is the human being a great tool for the job? And my argument is no, we are not built to read 20,000 tweets in a day. And the reality is that the machines got us into this problem. The machines made it possible for humans to generate more content than humans can read. So social media made a promise to its users that all may speak, and they do. Millions of people tweeting and all sorts of stuff. But that does not mean that the second promise that a lot of people thought they were getting was going to be kept. The second promise is that all may be heard. And the reality is that all are not heard. The distribution in social media is not a normal curve. It is a power law. And that means that less than 1% of the population really get heard. 93% of all tweets never get a reply. And so again, the question, just how social is social media? Answer, not very, not very. And so we could look at these tweets and we could try to identify the leaders. We could try to identify the factions, the divisions, the subgroups, the communities, the clusters. But we might not do it that well. We might not be good at it. And so we could reveal that information in less than 400 milliseconds. And there it is. We can show you the web of connections formed when people exchange 20,000 tweets in a day talking about a politician. And we can show that to you in a way that allows you to use the precious budget of tweets you can read and focuses that budget on the tweets from the people who got a lot of people to point at them, putting them at the center of the network, forming a cluster around them that was focused on the topic in a particular way. And so rather than using the words to find clusters, we use clusters, we use connections to find clusters. And then within clusters, we do the analysis of content. And so, let's see, number 4. Right, I see, I'm sorry. I was looking at the questions in the chat and I think you were arguing about Anscombe's quartet. I get it. So rather than show you row after row of numbers, or in this case, tweets, we would like to refocus your attention on the other side of a pre-processing step. We would like the machines to consume tweets, posts, emails, and grind them up to the point where the machine can point you at particular people, identify what they are talking about, what the group is that formed around them, and what that group is talking about, and even measure the difference between the interests of group 1 and group 2. And so networks have been criticized by people who say that network visualizations in particular are bad because there are bad network visualizations. And that is true. There are bad network visualizations, and this one might be one of them. But complaining about bad network visualizations is a lot like complaining about photography because there are bad photographs. And that's true, there are bad photographs, but that doesn't mean that photography is bad. So the answer to the question is, in what way can we make these images of networks better? And this is the same data, but now this data has been processed through this method. In this case, the group in a box layout for multifaceted analysis of communities, led by Eduardo Mendez Rodriguez and Natasha Milish-Freyling. This is a feature of NodeXL that is sort of like autofocus or white balance or color adjustment. It's a way to help the process of taking a photograph of a network, of a social network, of a social media network, as easy as possible, to make it a kind of camera, if you will, a visualization technology that allows the analyst to step back from the individual details and step towards an overview that invariably will lead you back to detail, but now you are consuming detail with an eye towards the context. This is the tweet that the leading person tweeted that got the most a number of other people to connect to it. And so the idea of these webs of connections telling stories, in this case, not data-driven stories, these are just cartoons, but I think if you know something about the cultures of these various tech companies, I know I spent 10 years at Microsoft, I think that's an accurate description of the experience I had there. What we see is that just a bunch of dots and a bunch of lines can be a form of communication of a level of nuance that would be maybe thousands of words to describe the ways in which different corporations are internally structured. And so our goal is to make it so that you could take that picture of anything as easily as possible. In the same way that this technology transformed photography from a profession into a hobby. Well, a profession and a hobby, right? They're still professional photographers, but now we're all photographers. And so we could try to raise our aspirations to, like the point and shoot disposable camera, or even digitize it. But this is now obsolete, right? None of us will ever actually pay money for one of these things. I don't know if they're even making these things anymore, because it was replaced by this. And I'm pretty sure that the camera in my iPhone is probably better than in one of those little credit card cameras from the early 2000s. And so our aspiration is to do that kind of thing. Easily take a machine augmented photo of a crowd, but not a physical crowd. In this case, it's a virtual crowd. And it's a virtual crowd from almost any data source. It's really just any collection of annotated connections. And later I'll show you that those connections certainly do not need to be digital. They do not need to be digital. And the example I'll show you is the work of Dr. Diane Klein, who, well, I think yeah, hang on a second. I think I can get to that. Yeah. There it is. Yeah, here's the work of Dr. Klein. Dr. Klein reads ancient Greek and converted all of the ancient Greek into a spreadsheet in which she identified who did what, with whom, when and where. And she likes to note that Alexander the Great did not have a Facebook page. He was an Instagram guy. But he did have a network. And that network is expressed in the various, thank you, Manuel, I appreciate it. In the various texts in which somebody would write down, Alexander sent horses to Philip. Nicanor sent his friend to Hector. They sent each other messages. And these people wrote about these various connections and exchanges of daughters, of horses, of resources, engaging in war with one another. And that can be represented as, in the same way that we represented the connections among ourselves, as an edgeless. And that means that networks are everywhere and they don't have to be digital. It just happens to turn out that digital networks are kind of interesting, and they may be worth our time. And I just want to be clear that if you are here and you have a non-digital network, we are certainly interested in supporting your research goals. But if you do have a digital network, my goodness, we can certainly help with that a little bit more, perhaps by facilitating the data collection as well as the analysis. So for Dr. Klein, all that data collection was very manual. But for us, we can go into the NodeXL ribbon in Excel, and we can go to the data menu, click on import, and come down to Twitter search network and pick a topic to study. We can pick a hashtag. We can pick a URL. We can pick a username. We can use the name of a politician, the name of a location, the name of an event. And just by clicking OK, we can end up with results like this. Results that we can very carefully configure, but which we can also achieve with almost no real training. In the same way that my iPhone camera can get me a pretty good result, but I pick the time, the place, and the thing it should focus on. But I admit it's a partner. It's doing the anti-vibration, the color adjustment, the exposure, the zoom, the focus. It's playing its role, but I am playing a role as well. So together we're a genius. Together, me and my iPhone, we take pretty good photos. Together with NodeXL, I can now do a lot of what the Python developer, the big data, social computing, computational social science person does, and I don't have to learn Python. Now, if you've already learned Python, more power to you, and no doubt you can take this even further if you do. But for those of us, myself included, for whom the first step of learn Python, learn MySQL, learn MongoDB, learn APIs, learn NetworkX, some of these are just bridges too far. And so instead, we're going to offer you spreadsheet. Spreadsheets that are probably pretty easy to click your way through, that have all the features of doing things like sorting with Excel, with the ability to add columns, to calculate metrics, to manually add categories, all those things that are really easy to do in Excel that are equally easy to do in databases, that assuming that you know SQL. And I guess, will all the people who know SQL please use the little raise hand icon in Zoom now? Let's just take a quick look. How many of us know SQL? And myself included, that would be, I think, just going to count again. That's 0. Okay, so if we put our data into SQL, which maybe is the better place for it if you know SQL, but what if you don't? Well, then how about a spreadsheet? And it's then trivial to do things like use charting tools to visualize patterns and dynamics in the data in a way that you may feel a little bit more comfortable with than trying to learn yet another programming language, SQL. So we are trying to provide to the social media scholar the set of essential tools that allow you to integrate network data, content analysis, time series data, to come away with a view of a collection of connections, a view of a group of people who are tweeting, who are posting, who are linking and liking, and really come away with a view of forest rather than leaf and branch and tree. And so this dialog box is how you tell NodeXL how to look at words. And we think it's about as simple a sentiment system as we can offer. It basically comes with a set of word lists pre-provided, but you get to change these lists of words. So if you prefer Korean, you can put Korean here. If you don't like positive, negative, and angry, violent, you can change the names of the lists. And so as an example, if we were studying automobiles and we wanted to compare Hyundai to Tesla, or Honda to Tesla, we might not like positive, negative, and angry, violent. We might prefer the categories performance, economy, and safety. I want a fast car, I want a cheap car, I want a safe car. And usually you get to pick any 2 out of the 3. And so in what way could you come up with your own vocabulary words? And if you do, you just paste them in these buckets and hit OK. At which point we will analyze the column that contains text. In this case, we found a column called tweet. The user selected the tweet column. He or she has decided that these are the words that do not matter and shouldn't be calculated at all. And then this is the list, the default list in this case, of positive, negative, and angry, violent words. And we're going to count these words in every tweet. Any of these words positive, any of these negative. And then we're going to do the same for every person. They have words. For any given person, how many positive words? But what about every group of people? They also have words. How many positive, how many negative? And then, of course, the graph as a whole. And this is a level of resolution, the micro, the meso, the macro, that really only network theory can provide. Only network theory can find the middle layer of groups without which you'd be falling back on language use, and that's ambiguous. So when we generate these networks, and I encourage you to come and visit us. Let's see, let's go find a browser. Here we go. Come and visit us at NodeXLGraphGallery.org. And I'll also introduce, well, there's a bunch of links in the chat for all of you who came in a little late. It's the same set of links that were sent via email, but this website and others are in that collection of links. So this is a website that is sort of like Instagram for graphs. You can think of it as Instagraph. But we won't call it that because we don't have a budget for attorneys. But like Instagram, where lots of people have cameras and they'd like to share the images, in this case, lots of people have NodeXL. They'd like to share the network graphs that they're generating with the tool. And you can find lots of things in here that may be of interest. We could go and find some of the Korea tweets. I think I have a recent map. Let's see here. That was somewhat relevant. It was the Blue House tweets. Let's see if I can find them. But as we go through here, I hope you'll be making some observations about the fact that these maps are not all the same. There's some variation. Certain structures show up again and again, but they're not universal. Not every map looks like every other map. And in that is some real wisdom. There is a variety of structures in social media, and we can actually visualize those structures and begin to zoom in on various topics in an effort to understand who occupies different kinds of positions in the network, what topics are being discussed. So let's pick a topic of possible interest. Let's see, social media is a topic, I think, of some interest to us all here. And we might find that there are people talking about social media in many, many, many contexts. And so let's go pick one that will be relevant to us. And one might be something like social media professors. And so here's a little hashtag, SMProfs. And this map is 236 Twitter users. And it's actually almost 2.5 months of data. So it's a slow network, not that fast. And it mostly centers on about a dozen people who sit at the center of these hub and spoke structures. And that makes them broadcasters. These people around the hub here, around the ring, yeah, that's right. There's Jeremy Harris Lipschitz and Karen Freiberg. And these people are at the center of talking about teaching about social media, at least in Twitter. They're also very prominent in Facebook. We can't get to that data anymore, unfortunately. And when we look at this, we could choose to either read the set of tweets, and there were a lot of tweets. There were a total of 2,299 different connections formed among all these people. And so we have a choice. We can read all the tweets and maybe keep a notepad and try to figure out who are the leaders and what are the clusters. But we might make mistakes and we might have other things to do with our time. And instead, we might just want to take the tool and run all of that data through this. And then we get this. We get a report that is a lot like espresso. You have choices, right? You can get the big Americano or the iced coffee. But if you really want your caffeine and you want it right now, espresso, little tiny cups, right? Little tiny shot glasses. And you get everything you'd get in the big cup, but real fast and really intensely. And so here you'll see our menu off to the side. This is the set of things that you can know about a Twitter hashtag or any other collection of tweets. We can know who the overall influencers are. We can know what the top URLs are. Actually, they really like NodeXL. The top domains. So it's not all NodeXL. It's also the AJMC and Social Media Today. We can look at the top hashtags. And we might discover that, oh, there are these other hashtags like SMM that we might also be interested in. And so that might lead us on a chase where we go off and look for hashtag SMM. Let's see if we can find SMM. You can, yeah, there it was. Come back. SMM, social media marketing, right? The hashtag social media marketing. And so we've started in one domain and we're slowly moving to another domain. Here we've got almost 3,000 people. And this happened in just over a week. And so if you're studying how has social media been professionalized in the PR marketing communities, how do corporate communications use social media, you might want to subject those 8 days of data to analysis rather than sitting down and reading it all. Now, having said that, you then get to discover, well, here are those people. Here are the people at the center of this discourse. And you might follow some of them, or you might just click through some of them to go and look at their content more deeply. Or you might use our smart tweet button, which tries to write for you a tweet that mentions the hashtags most interesting to that person as shown through content analysis. So each person has the words they use most and more than others. And so we find those hashtags, the hashtags these people use more than other people use them, and include them in a tweet that you can use as a rough draft, a raw initial draft of a message you would share with that person. And this is going to tell us what are they linking to. And I'd like to point out something about the nature of that data. Here's 108 links to getbook.at, a particular URL. But here in group 1, that URL does not appear. Group 2 does not appear. Group 3 does not appear. That means that the data that you get at the all population level does not reflect what is happening at the individual group level. In fact, you can see from this display, the words at the top of the clusters are not all the same. You know, group 4 is talking about web design, a topic that does not exist in group 3. And so social media is not a monolith. It's not just one big conversation. It's really a collection of smaller networks with a certain amount of interconnection, it's true. And so some of these clusters do cross connect, but most of the time you're really seeing somebody and their audience, some one account and its audience. Not so much its community, its audience. If community is a requirement for community is that it has both reciprocity and density, we may have to look into clusters like this to be able to find evidence of that. Here we're seeing people who are all cross-connected rather than in parts of the graph like here, where almost nobody at the end of these spokes is connected to each other. Not community, audience. Over here, maybe community, maybe audience. So a necessary but not sufficient indicator of community would be density and reciprocity. So what we're seeing in these reports is the espresso shot of a hashtag, of a discussion group, of an email list. presented to you in a way that achieves the function of report. You no longer need to necessarily read all the tweets in order to come away with a statement like, this is a network of 2,921 Twitter users who tweeted hashtags SMM during time period to time period, and so on. And in fact, these words are written for you because we figure you might have to write them. And if you write them, they might take you 8, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And if we write them, they'll take you 0 minutes. And how many times can you do it a day? The computer can do it about 100 times a day per laptop. I can't. And so our goal is to stretch you, the analyst, the scholar, the investigator, so that your powers of perception, of insight, of narrative, of theoretical relevance, those are brought to bear. Your ability to maximally consume tens of thousands of data points, we're not going to lean into that one. You are not a machine. I am not a machine. Machines should do machine things. Humans should do human things. My job is to understand and provide meaning, not to be a machine that gobbles up 2,921 Twitter users' tweets and tries to calculate some sense of their importance. Machines are good at that. And so we have used these insights, and I'm going to point you to a related article at Pew Internet. If you type in Pew Research or Pew Internet and NodeXL, you'll probably get this link. And this is mapping Twitter topic networks from polarized crowds to community clusters. And in this article, you will find this diagram, figure 3. And I'll give you a moment to try to Google this up, Pew Internet NodeXL, and it's at the bottom of the first page of that article. The real meaning of the whole article is summarized here, and it is just to say they're not all the same. They have different structures, and we can identify and name at least 6 of these structures. These are the schematic diagrams here, and these are real world data sets that those reflect at the bottom. That is it, and thank you, Peter, appreciate that. What you're seeing then are archetypes and real world examples. And it illustrates the idea that in some cases we will see, and we've seen some examples already, 2 relatively dense, tight crowds with limited connection between them. And this is typically the pattern of political polarization. US politics often look like this. This is a relatively rare pattern, the pattern of everybody actually connecting to everybody. And that is the pattern of community or a tight crowd. And it's not that easy to find. More common is this pattern, the pattern in which everyone in the data set did not say anybody else's name and no one said their name. Kind of sad. In network terms, this is a person we would call an isolate. An isolate is the person with 0 connections to any other node. And that's, of course, as compared to people who are central or popular, who have a lot of degree, like these people. These people have lots of connections. By comparison, these people have 0 connections. And so this pattern, and it looks like this when we look at it in real world data, these are what we call the brand cluster. And why brand? Well, because when we make maps for brands, this is a cluster we see a lot of. People mentioning McDonald's, people talking about iPhone. A lot of times when you say the word iPhone, you don't say the name of somebody else. and nobody talks to you, or at least a statistically significant fraction of the time. In fact, it's usually about 53% of the population in a brand, for a major brand, slightly less for things that are topics that get some discussion but are also highly fragmented, and we call those community clusters, where you'll see the brand clusters and then a lot more of these little communities along the side. And this usually represents news of the day, because each of these is a different news outlet, each with their own audiences. And the last two of the six, hub and spoke, and another hub and spoke, but in the schematic view, you can see one is hub and spoke in and one is hub and spoke out. And that means, in this case, somebody tweets and a lot of people retweet or reply to that person. And in this case, a lot of people tweet about a problem and then this person replies to them. And so this is EasyJet or United Airlines or your telephone company or your credit card company, or things that you complain about in public, and then it replies to you. A good example down here is Dell. Dell tries to listen and tries to care. And it sits here in the center of a support network, replying to a bunch of people trying to tell them how to get their laptops fixed. And so when we look at these patterns, the hope is that it is a kind of Rosetta Stone that then allows us to come back to the NodeXL graph gallery and look at these networks and say, aha, I see an isolate cluster. I see another one and another one, but a lesser one here. That one doesn't have as big an isolate cluster. And isn't it interesting that in some cases, the isolate cluster is the biggest cluster. In some cases, it's a smaller cluster. In some cases, it almost doesn't appear at all. And so that tells us something. Some topics have an isolate cluster and some don't. And when you don't, you're not a brand. Nobody knows about you outside of the usual suspects, the in-group, the people who already know. And so a discussion like CRM, customer relationship management, it's a technology concept, it's a buzzword, it's a three-letter acronym. CRM, the largest group, is the group of people who say nobody's name and nobody says their name. Compare that to Canadian politics, CDN Poly, where it's not much of a brand. It's the 7th largest group, are the no mentions of anybody. And so it's a different shape. It's got a different type of crowd. And so I'm a sociologist. This makes me very, very happy. There is structure and not randomness in social organization. That's great news. But what that means is that we can now start to point this at topics of interest to scholars. And there are lots of topics of interest. We had a couple of requests. I don't know if that person is here, but they'll hear about this on the recording. Lately, topics like not okay, me too, stop Asian hate, topics like Black Lives Matter. These are topics of broad interest. Scholars would like to understand these topics. These are fast moving social media topics that can generate, in this case, over 2 days, almost 7,000 people tweeted. And they tweeted a total of 3,000 tweets that generated 11,000 connections. And so, would you like to read them all? He said rhetorically. And the answer, I believe, is, well, I'm willing to read some tweets, but I'd like to read the right ones, and I'd still like not to be subject to the critique. What about the tweets you didn't read? And so when you go and look at these kinds of reports, we hope you will be in a position to say higher level statements about who the leaders are, what they care about, whether or not they agree or disagree with a topic. And that you'll be able to generate another one of these day after day after day, not only for one topic, but for multiple topics. And in doing so, gain a kind of situational awareness that in some cases might be very, very critical. And I'm thinking now of disinformation issues and thinking about how many of our lives now really depend on not just overcoming the pandemic, but also addressing what is now referred to as the infodemic. And so here you can find maps of the word anti-vax. And of course, some of these people are, of course, opponents to anti-vax, but many of them are supporters of the idea of anti-vax. And, you know, vaccines should be tested and all that, but that doesn't mean that we should be opposing the use of vaccine. And so maybe it's useful to know, who is the mayor of anti-vax? What are they linking to? What news resources? What web resources? And who has the time to read all of that stuff? So why not just drill? Why not just zoom in and see who are the leaders? What are they talking about? What are the resources? And how does this environment change over time? So with that, we're about to start a break. We are, I believe, is that correct? We are about to start our break. And I believe that will be a 30-minute break. During that time, if you'd like to ask me any questions, I'm going to come back and check the chat, and we can go into a breakout room or something like that. But otherwise, I'll check in on the chat every few minutes, and I think we are going to restart again in 30 minutes. Let me hand it over to Manuela to see if that's correct.
Yeah, we're just in time. Well, you mentioned breakout rooms. We can open one. That's not a problem for people who want to stay. I'm gonna leave the Zoom open. So I can open one breakout room, I'd say.
Okay, I will join you in the breakout room shortly, and I'm happy to do Q&A in there in a few minutes, and otherwise we will restart our discussion here shortly. I'm going to share another link with an example of our new and more advanced version. Oh, wow, okay. Do you want me to assign people, or should I just
No, I
join?
just opened it now, so people can go in fully if they want. It's open now, so it's just if you're done, if we're gonna go into the break, then people who wants to go into the breakout room. Okay. Go open the. So anyone who's in here now, please feel free to go into the breakout room. I'm gonna put it on the slide.
Recording in progress.
I can't see my slide.
Okay.
Oh. Is it all of us? I will come back. Okay.